Welcome to Closing Time, the show for go-to-market leaders. My name is Chip House. I am CMO at Insightly CRM, and I'm joined today by Krysten Conner, who's a sales coach, a trainer, and she specializes in helping companies increase their win rates and deal size. Welcome to the show, Krysten.
Hey, Chip, it's so great to be here.
So I love your background, and I'd like to start there because you've had some impressive logos with Outreach and Tableau, but it sounds like you started out as a teacher. Is that right?
Yeah, I started out teaching eighth grade US history. And
Wow.
yeah, it was, as it turns out, a great prep, a great way to get introduced to sales because in teaching, you are literally standing in front of an audience who, for the most part, doesn't care what you want to say. And you need to hook their attention, right? And be able to keep their attention and then be able to help them discover something that you know that they don't, and be able to do that in a way that's not condescending but piques their interest and gets them to learn more. And so, like, if you just sub out teacher for salesperson, like the jobs are similar.
So, Krysten, this is why I was excited to talk because you've come up with 9 discovery questions that you say you wish you had learned earlier in your career. What mistakes do you think reps, particularly the new ones, make in terms of discovery?
Yeah, the early on in our careers, we over-index on questions about features and functions related to our product. And that is really not the fault of the rep, because most of the training that reps get is around the product. It's around feature and function, and they're designed, and many of the questions that they're taught to ask are leading questions. They're almost like gotcha questions. How can I lead this person into a trap of saying they need this thing versus to be honest, it's much easier to train a rep how to use a product or the features of a product than it is to teach them business acumen and how to have and guide an open conversation. So there's a lot of mistakes, but they're honest mistakes. Sales reps want to guide good discovery.
I think it's probably starts a bit with curiosity and truly being concerned and interested about the buyer and their business. So I think the questions that you have definitely touch on some of that curiosity. And
Yes.
so let's start with some of these questions. And I'm going to read these to make it easier on myself. So your first question is, in this role, I talk to industry leaders all day long. They tell me about the heartburn around problems such as A, B, and C. How much of that sounds like your world, and what did I miss? Why is that a great question?
Yeah, the best discovery questions work no matter what product or service we're offering, right? And this one works no matter where you are. And this is why. And I actually adapted this from a guy named Charles Muehlbauer. He is on LinkedIn, and all he talks about is discovery. He's a great follow because discovery is one of those things that you could work on forever and just keep getting better at. But the reason this works is it immediately starts to establish our credibility if we nail the problems, right? Like if we know the top 3 things that are generally on the mind of the persona that's joining the call, what that tells them is it puts them at ease because they know, oh, well, Chip knows, he understands my problem. Now I don't have to explain the basics to him. Like it starts to put us more at a peer level. And now that now that I know I don't have to educate you, now I can speak openly about what it is that I'm facing. And you've established credibility, and you've also left it open because these are the typical problems, but every organization is different. And so with that last question is so important. How does this sound like your world, and what did I miss? Because we want them to correct us. We want them to tweak it and adjust it because that's where the really important information comes in. And we're playing into that human tendency. Humans love to correct other humans. They especially love to correct salespeople. So we want to give them that chance because it's a win for everybody.
Yeah, it seems like it's the first step of moving from a salesperson to the trusted advisor
Yes.
role that you're trying to
Yep.
get into and be accepted as by the potential buyer.
Yes.
I love this other question that we're going to talk about. So you might ask a buyer, so you're looking to change or improve a specific metric. By how much? What does that do for you?
I think I was just talking with a sales leader this morning, and we were talking about how the best sellers are always collecting discovery questions. This one I learned, this was a combination question I learned from Craig Hanahan and Dave Rubenstein when I was working with them at Outreach. The second piece that goes along with that is quantifying by how much. So I say, okay, Chip, you say that you're the CMO. CMOs usually care a lot about pipeline. So you want to increase the pipeline that you have. By how much? Are we talking millions or tens of millions? Because then we start to wrap our arms around, like, how big is the size of this problem? So we start to understand, is this a problem likely worth solving? And then the buyer, sometimes they haven't even said that out loud to themselves. And so sometimes they're like, oh gosh, well, I actually think we would need to increase it by probably about 10.2 million. That's our gap. And then all of a sudden everybody's like, whoa, right? Like, the best discovery helps the buyer think more deeply about the problem.
And it helps you get into their shoes a bit and see the problem from their angle, which I
Yes.
think has to help as a salesperson.
Yeah. The more we put ourselves in the shoes of the buyer, not only in discovery calls, but throughout the entire process, the better that's going to feel to the buyer. Everyone wants to feel understood.
Makes sense. So I know what it's like to be a new executive, especially the first 60 or 90 days. You're trying to assess the situation and learn as much as you can about the company, the messaging, your target audience, etc. And so you have a very specific question for new hires, and it's, what kinds of things did you get hired to change or start? I love that.
Yeah, this one, a VP of sales at Salesforce was leading a team meeting, and he said, guys, do you realize that no executive gets hired to keep things the same? And we were like,
Yeah.
whoa, that's right. If they wanted things to stay the same, they wouldn't have brought in this person. And so then that's where I started asking the question, what did you get hired to change or start? The other thing is, when executives change jobs, usually the reason they got hired is to duplicate the past success that they've demonstrated somewhere else, right? So if you've been a CMO at one place, and how you get that next job at the bigger company is you say, I did this and this and this, and then the other company says, that's exactly what we're looking to do. And so you come into that role going, okay, these are the results I drove here. That's what I'm looking to recreate here. So you usually come into that 30, 60, 90 days going, these are the three things that I want to do or put in motion. So when we ask about that, it's not a hard question for the executive, because that's what they're thinking about all day long.
I mean, I think, yeah, definitely an executive role. A lot of us in the B2B space were hired to be change agents.
Yes.
Yeah, and so when you ask about that change,
Yep.
you're asking about something that's very important to me.
Yes.
And I want to tell you all about it.
Exactly.
So you're exactly right. Here's another great question that can be very powerful in terms of increasing deal size, since you get a broader look at the organization and the response. The question is, how widely felt is this pain across your whole organization? Is it just a few teams, or is it a top 3 strategic priority?
Yeah, this is really important to ask if we are having a first meeting with someone who has a manager or director title, because managers and directors are thinking about, like, in sales, it's always about what's in it for me. And what's in it for them is they're concerned about the performance of their own teams. When you get to that VP and CXO level, that's where they're more concerned with risk, market share, strategic priorities. That's what they're thinking about. But managers and directors are lots of times still thinking about, how do I make life better? How do I increase the results of this team? And so I've learned from hard experience of doing it the wrong way that sometimes managers and directors care very deeply about something, but it only matters to their team. And that's not unless they have enough budget to buy your solution, that's not going anywhere. And so again, you're helping them think out loud uh, about how easy or hard it is going to be to get this evaluation pushed through their organization. And so hopefully we're saving everyone a bunch of time. If it's something they love as a manager, but it's not going to get traction, we don't want them to waste their time on it, and we don't want to spend our time on it, because in the end, it's not going to go anywhere.
Yeah, but if it's a strategic priority, you definitely need to know that, right? Like if the CEO
Right.
cares about this thing, you
Exactly.
want to know,
Oh, exactly.
right?
Exactly. Right. That's the best case scenario, right? And so if you have a director or a VP level saying, "Hey, you know what? We did SKO, about 6 weeks ago, and on the top three slide, on the top three things for the year, this was number 2 on the slide." Now you're golden.
Yeah, that makes sense. Sometimes as a buyer too, you may have a problem and you need to solve it, but you're not ready to, or you don't have the budget to. And
Yes.
there's sort of like this tension with the salesperson, maybe. And that's why I like this next question that you ask. And I don't think I've ever been asked this question. And that is, how can I best match your urgency? I love that. That's so cool.
Yeah, this is one again that this is one I've collected. I heard this from a great seller at Tableau, but it really does help. It's very much a win-win, because, and I usually use this at the end of a first or second call, where I would say, "Hey, Chip, it's been great to talk with you today." Generally, there's about 3 reasons why CMOs would join a call like this. One, they're just looking at new tools. They want to understand what's out there. They're in education mode. 2 is they have a big problem that they need to solve, and they were hoping that something we do might help solve that problem. And the third thing is they've got something that it's a problem that's not yet a priority. They're going to be looking at something in the next 12, 18 months. I'm curious where you'd put yourself on that spectrum. And I'm asking because I never want to be the one to chase anything. I'm not going to try to blow up your inbox. If you're in education mode, that's just fine. When we give people an out to be like, "I'm just looking," right? Like, that's hugely helpful. And if we have truly an executive buyer and they need to get something done and they have a feeling you can help, they're going to tell you, "This is my top priority for Q2. We have to get this done because of X, Y, and Z." But when we give them multiple choice, we allow them to opt in or out. And then everyone, like, I'm a big fan of being transparent. And if we're transparent, the more likely the buyer will be as well.
Yeah, it makes sense. And you can definitely feel disrespected as a buyer if it feels like you're being
Yeah,
trying to being rushed into
right.
a decision, right? And so I think that sort of disarms the buyer, and that's why I like it so much.
It's interesting that you've never been asked. I think that's sad. But I also think reps get I think reps get happy ears, right? Because if you like what I'm showing you, that's not the same as saying it's the thing that's most important to me. And I'm also never a huge fan of when I've heard people say timeline is an excuse or whatever. I find that to be utter BS. Like, there are 12 fires an executive is dealing with. The top 3 are what they're doing right now, but that doesn't mean that the other ones aren't going to be dealt with. And I think I'm always a fan of the long game in sales. Like, if you tell me it's going to be a priority 6, 9 months from now, I'm going to work to provide insight to you, to add value, to stay on top of your radar until the time that you're ready, because I believe, hopefully I've given you an out to tell me if it's not important. And so you say, it is important, but just a few months from now, I'm going to honor that, and I'm going to work to show you a good buying experience as we move along your timeline.
Yeah, I love that because, I mean, if you're working with me on my timeline and okay, maybe it's not the top priority, but it's number 4 or
Right,
5 or 6,
right,
and you've now moved from salesperson to consultant who's helping me
correct.
solve a problem, which is
Yep.
great. So, Krysten, I love this discussion, all the way from a teacher to a sales trainer extraordinaire. And so, where can our listeners get a copy of your 9 discovery questions?
Yeah, if they head over to my website, which is just KrystenConner.com, they can sign up right at the top and it'll shoot that right over to them. And if they find me on LinkedIn, there's a link to my website from there too. So lots of ways to find me. Thank you so much for having me. I've loved this discussion.
It was so great, Krysten. Thank you so much for joining us. And thanks to all of you for tuning in to this episode of Closing Time. And we'll see you next time.